In 1854, Britain entered the Crimean War. Almost immediately, reports started flooding back to London of thousands of soldiers dying in massive numbers. While cannons and muskets took their toll, the true slaughter occurred in the hospital wards, where typhus, cholera, and dysentery claimed far more lives than enemy fire. The British Secretary of War asked Florence Nightingale to organize a team of nurses and traveled to Scutari in modern-day Istanbul. When she arrived at the military hospital, she found a logistical and sanitary nightmare. Wards were built directly over leaking cesspools. There was zero ventilation. The water was contaminated with raw sewage, and soldiers were sleeping on floors crawling with rats, without even basic soap or clean linens. Nightingale realized the British Army's own medical infrastructure had become a death trap, making the hospital far deadlier than the front lines. She immediately enforced strict hand-washing protocols, flushed the sewers, and established a laundry. She also began rigorously collecting data to prove that environmental contamination was the true killer. But Nightingale faced a massive political hurdle. The ruling class, specifically Queen Victoria and Parliament, routinely ignored the dry academic tables of numbers used by statisticians at the time. If she could not bridge this communication gap and force policy changes, countless more soldiers would die from preventable infections. She understood that having life-saving data was worthless without a new method of persuasion that made politicians feel the true severity of the crisis. Working with the statistician William Farr, Nightingale invented an entirely new visual language. She called it a coxcomb, though today we know it as the polar area diagram. Standard pie charts were ill-suited for the task. Because their slices change angles to represent percentages, they fail to show a continuous seasonal timeline. Instead, she used a 360-degree circle to represent a continuous cyclical year. The circle is divided into 12 equal wedges of 30 degrees each. Each wedge represents 1 month, allowing a viewer to track how deaths swelled during the freezing winters and shifted as seasons changed. Because the 30-degree angle remains constant for every month, the death rate is represented by the total area of the wedge. This area varies strictly in proportion to the square of the radius. To show a death rate that was 4 times larger, she only had to double the radius. This created massive, blooming shapes that were impossible for a politician to ignore. This geometric framework ensured total mathematical accuracy while deliberately maximizing the visual shock value of the data. The final layer of her design was a 3-part color coding system used to instantly separate the causes of mortality. This diagram shows the specific anatomy of the tragedy. The red middle sections represent deaths from battlefield trauma, and the black inner sections track all other causes, like accidents or old age. Then there are the blue and gray sections. These massive blocks completely dwarf the tiny slivers at the center, representing the staggering number of deaths from preventable infectious diseases like cholera and typhus. At a single glance, the image proved that the horrific casualty numbers resulted from administrative failure and poor hygiene, rather than the risks of war. The diagram shocked the British government into action, stripping away their ability to plead ignorance about the conditions in the barracks. Following her report, the government formed a permanent Army Sanitary Commission and completely rewrote the building regulations for military barracks. Modernized ventilation and sewage systems caused the mortality rate across the British peacetime army to plummet below that of civilian populations. By winning this statistical argument, Nightingale's work tangibly eradicated a systemic killer and forced the birth of modern public health administration. Nightingale translated this data-driven victory into physical architecture by championing the Nightingale ward layout. This pavilion-style blueprint maximized natural light and fresh cross-ventilation, the exact environmental cures for the infectious diseases she had mapped in Crimea. Her work turned nursing into a highly skilled, honorable profession, leading to her becoming the first woman to be awarded Britain's Order of Merit. History often remembers the comforting lady with the lamp, but her true power lay in her brilliant, calculating, mathematical mind. Florence Nightingale's legacy is defined by her ability to transform complex data into an unstoppable weapon for systemic reform.